I want to start today by giving neoliberalism 101. But it's not really going to be in the context of true neoliberalism 101. It's going to be in the context of money. And I think this is important because we are snowed so often by the lies that they tell us about our own economy, lies they tell us about income, the lies they tell us about wealth. I don't know if you ever hear a right-wing person or the sycophants that defend the rich all of the times. People that would, whenever, progressives come out there and say, we need to tax the rich, we need to tax those who most are taken out of this system. There is this phantom argument that they use all of the times that they say things like, the rich doesn't have enough money to be taxed, or there's not enough money, there's not enough income out there. That's why we have to go broad base to the middle class. And, I can see where they're coming from. I understand where they're coming from because the ignorance of the statement was implanted not by them, but by the concerted efforts of those who, following the tenets of the Powell memo being that document written by Democrat Lewis Powell, who was ascended to the Supreme Court by Republican Nixon. He was the lawyer for the Chamber of Commerce. He pointed out, look, man, people are getting smart. The progressives are really getting their message across. People are starting to ask the most important questions. Why do we do all the work? Why do they do all the work? The progressives are saying, why do we, progressive representing all the people, why are we doing all the work, but all the spoils go to the top? And that's what really happens. We do the work and they make the money. They take it all. That's what happens, folks. That is what happened. They don't tell you it's what happened. That's what happens. And people started to get it. And all in the 70s, that time of the year that Mayana makes fun of, all in the 80s, these people started to get, well, actually the 80s is when the clamp came down with Donald Trump, with Ronald Reagan, but folks started to understand what was happening. So the magic that they did, they put that statement in there, and then mathematically people say, well, how much income is generated in this country? Oh yeah, if you claim that you could just tax the wealth, the income of the rich, you would never ever be able to, pay all these taxes that are needed to support the welfare state. The welfare state, they've made that sound pretty bad, but there's nothing called the welfare state that is bad. The welfare state just means we as a society collectively work to ensure that we all fulfill the preamble of the Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, and the part that says in order for the welfare of us all. And that's what it's all about. If you don't think about the welfare of all, if you don't think about collectivism for all, there's no point in society. You don't have a society. You have a fief-servdom. You have a slavery master. It doesn't matter how you quote it. That's what you get. If you don't have a collective society where together we all work to make life better for all, we're not talking about equality. We're talking about equity, where everybody has equal access to success. If you want to make more than the other person, as long as you're doing more work, that's equitable. As an example, Brother Musk does very little. Let's just read LV, who says, if Elon Musk was forced to contribute proportionally to Social Security, it would be solvent for 75 years, and he would never even miss the money. And you're right about that. Actually, if all were to do that, it'll be solvent forever going forward. But so let's explain the magic that these people do. The magic that these people do is redefine income. When you go to work, when LVW goes to make our children intelligent at school by being the teacher, when she goes to school and make people intelligent, she's doing something productive for society, and she gets a check. She gets a check to pay for her services, a very important service. When that engineer goes to work, he gets a check. He exchanges that check for his services. When the lawyer, the doctor, the janitor, the garbage collector, all of them do something that is immensely important to society, and they get a check. They get their income. And that income in order for all of us to have streets and flowing water and bridges, we take a piece of that check and build something with it. But then there are those who get a check for doing nothing. They will say, well, I invest my money into something that give other people's a check. And for investing my money, I get a cut of everything they produce, irrespective of how long it takes. And let me tell you how arcane that type of a system is when implemented ad nauseum. That person who owns Intel, and Intel is owned by quite a few thousand people, they go ahead and they take their money and they give that money to Intel. It's called an investment. And when they invest, and we're not even talking about how they got the money in the first place. A lot of it is ill-gotten gains. Let me digress a minute. That rancher in West Texas who owns 1 million acres in West Texas, somehow that family got that land. King Ranch. Let's just look at the King Ranch. They got that, and forever on moving forward, all the oil on that land, all the pasture to graze their cattle on that land, all of that they took, they robbed, they stole, and it's theirs for centuries now, or several, over 100 years. It's theirs, right? And with that, for life, they're able to have assets, and they take some of that money and they invest in companies who pay the peons who make wages. The peons being the engineers, the lawyers, the doctors, etc. They get wages from the capital, those folks who we don't know how they got their money, but they invest. And for that, society, the way it is constructed today, gives them a cut of everything everybody who works for Intel makes. It gives them the profit from, let's say, that engineer and scientist design a chip. That engineer and scientist who design that chips get paid once, right? Or if they continue working, they get paid. But that chip lives on forever and ever and ever. So that stockholder, the shareholder who put just their money, not their work, they just said, I want a piece of what that worker makes. So they go ahead, they buy a stock in a company. The workers in the company, the slaves in the company do the work. They create the chip. They create all these things. And that person who had the capital to invest forever and forevermore gets a piece of the action for everybody who works at that factory. They lay you off, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They continue to make money doing nothing. That's the system. Can you blame them for using the system the way it's designed? No, I don't blame the shareholder. I mean, you have a lot of retirees that have money in these stock in Intel and all that. Do I want them to? No, I don't want them to disappear. I just want folks to understand the concept of how we have those who work for their jobs and those who simply sit on their and make income from everybody else because they had capital. No matter how they got the capital, most of it, if you want to be technical about it, stolen. They invest their stolen capital and they're forever rich by doing nothing. Everybody likes to use as an example those who pulled themselves up and got rich from their bootstraps. What you find when you go into the underlying story, it's never that simple. From, people talk about them building stuff in a garage and also the people like, let's say, Bezos who, started with just selling one book at a time and it turned into the best retailer. Those are the fantasies they tell. Just like the fantasies we hear about how our great country started. Our country wasn't great. We, over time, made our country great. But, you get all these myths about how we started, the Thanksgiving myth, the Christopher Columbus myth. These were savages. Christopher Columbus was a savage, but we learn these myths and then we turn it into folklore. And because we turn all these things into folklore, etc., we get to live the lie. And people are pained by the lie. So going back to the subject at hand. So we have the way that people make their money. Okay. Now, it's bad enough that we get the wealthy as loafers. In other words, oh, I see a good deal. I invest in that good deal and I start to make money off of that good deal no matter what. I want to tell you a few of the other lies they tell. They say, well, that person, the poor peon, we, the poor peons, or not we, the sycophant peons who always are there to protect the wealthy who cares nothing about them would say, well, they invested their money. They put their money at risk. Okay. Yeah, they put their money at risk. You're right. Because some companies will fail. But the lie is that if these companies fail, these people lose their money. And that is false. When a wealthy person loses money in company number A, they don't lose that money. They recover that money through write-offs. That's how the tax system works. And that's why I say education is so important. So let's say I'm super wealthy and I buy a whole bunch of stocks in Intel. And let's say Intel goes under. But I also bought a whole bunch of stock in NVIDIA. NVIDIA starts to make a ton of money. And I start to make a ton of money in the capitalization that I did with NVIDIA. I won't start paying any taxes on NVIDIA until I recover the losses that I took in Intel. So even if I lose money in Intel, because I have investments in many other things, I write off those losses from Intel on my NVIDIA profits. So ultimately, I lose nothing. They don't tell you that. But these are all the magical things that the lies about, oh, these people take risks. In employment, who take risks? You see that engineer at Intel who is in that clean room of bad gases that even if it's in a small quantity, they breathe in and eventually get lung cancer. That farmer who's messing with those fertilizers to grow our food on those company farms that get cancer in their liver, etc. Those are the people taking risks. The American worker, you, the folks that are listening to me, you're the ones taking the risk, not the wealthy. But it gets even worse because here's the deal. When I call a large percentage of the wealthy, either they are psychopaths themselves or because of their lack of knowledge or implicit psychopaths. I'm serious. So all of us work, LB work as a teacher and all these other folks work as engineers, etc. All these people go to work and they make money and they pay wages. And their wages are taxed. Their income is taxed so that we can have streets and we can have clean air, all these good things that your taxes pay for. But they're a group that most benefit from all of the good things that society have to offer, streets and all of that don't want to pay their fair share. The wealthy person use the roads more than anybody else because their trucks from their factories, the airplanes that deliver their products, all these things they use more than anybody else to make income, but they always try not to pay. And people say, well, again, they're not making enough income if you calculate what income is. So what do? They redefine what is income. So while you get wages, you have income, and your income can be taxed at up to 30. I think the max now is 37 or 39%, somewhere around that. Your marginal increase in your wages, and we have a progressive thing. So you pay at the highest rate, you pay 30 something percent. The wealthy person that is accumulating that wealth, they don't pay anywhere close to that. And let me tell you why. Because as they collect, they don't want to collect income as wages. They don't want to collect all their income as dividends. Dividends is like you own a stock, you get a percentage, it's like an interest rate, but it's a percentage. It's a profits that are divided to pay you a dividend. That dividend would be taxed as sort of not exactly at wages, but similar to wages, a higher tax rates. They don't want that. So instead, when these companies start to make profits, they don't necessarily want to only pay dividends because dividends are taxable, not as taxable as wages, but they're taxable. And, they don't want to pay any tax. So what do? They say, okay, let's redefine how we are going to be paid. We don't want to be paid fully in dividends. We want to be paid in tax appreciation. That means they want to see that Intel stock go up in price, what's known as capital gains. So when you're watching that TV and you see all the stock prices going up, that's people making money that, first of all, not taxed at all, right? Because you don't pay taxes on capital gains, meaning the increase in the price of the stock, which makes you more money until you sell that stock. And even when you sell that stock, the amount you pay in taxes for capital gains, which is still income, still money, is different than the person who goes to work every day, working with their hands, putting their body at risk, building that dam, building all these things and putting themselves at risk. The person who sells a stock and get a huge gain in that stock pays less in taxes than the American worker. So that's one way that they get over the tax system, why we have a larger tax burden on all of us, why they talk about austerity, because they don't want to tax them. The money is there. We're just not taxing them. But it goes further. These people start to say, wait a minute, but I don't want, is there some other way I can not pay any taxes? And they say, yeah, there's another way I can not pay any taxes. And how is that? Well, you know what we'll do? We'll create a new mechanism. I will keep all of my stocks appreciating yearly. They constantly appreciate. We constantly have the companies buy back their stocks. Instead of paying the dividends from those profits that we make, we take those profits and buy back stocks. When the government gives them subsidies, instead of hiring people, they take those subsidies and buy back stocks. Remember the PPP and all of that? People were getting paid like crazy and buying back their stocks. And that caused, because there are less stocks for the same company, the price per stock go up. These people make a lot of money tax-free until they sell it, but they are not selling it. And why aren't they selling it? Because guess what they do? They go to a bank or an insurance company and they say, hey, I want you to loan me money. And the bank lends them money using the stock as a collateral for the money that they loan that they will never, ever pay back because the bank is using the stocks as a collateral. So when they file their taxes, even as they're taking out millions of dollars in loans so that they can live however extravagant they want to, they pay no taxes because it's a loan, baby. And we don't pay taxes on wealth. We don't pay taxes on wealth, which is the only way to solve our problem. We have got to have a wealth tax because that is where all the money is hidden in extraordinary wealth. And when they say, but there's not enough money, you can't tell me that 3 people control more than 20% of all the wealth in the country, and we don't have the money there by taxing these people. It's a fraud on your intelligence. It's a fraud on you. It's a theft of our resources, and that's the economic system we have. I just said it the way it is. You listen to CNBC, they make it sound sexy, like it is something everybody has the opportunity to do and everybody can participate, etc. It's a lie. It is a psychopathic pathway that the wealthy use to constantly extract all the services, all what we produce. We are a rich country. I don't think people understand how rich we are. And the inequities, the inequalities in the way we distribute our money is by design. And that design is called unfettered capitalism. And if anybody who has heard this discourse, and assuming that I was marginally well in saying it, let's say I did a fairly good job in explaining it. If you are still out there trying to say, let's have austerity and not tax the wealthy, then if too many of you believe that, the country is in irreparable trouble. Because the reason we are in the state that we're in today is the pilfer of that class on the rest of us. It's the pilfer, the pillage. And it's done, I talk about antiseptic slavery. It is done so nicely. It is done so antiseptically that you don't see it. And that's the magic in all of this. As I'm putting the knife in you, I'm smiling and telling you I love you. That's what type of economic system we have. And until we understand it, learn it, and then unabashedly elect people who are going to go to those parasites and tell those parasites the game is over. We're taking back what's ours. Until that day comes, we will continue having starving babies. We'll continue making bombs instead of building canals. Ironically, and this may sound horrendous, but ironically, China is no good person, the government, but they actually see some merit with their belt and roads or whatever they called it around the world that now America fears in understanding some of these concepts.
All of our country's problems, from polarization to ignorance on domestic and international issues to a complete misunderstanding of our economic and healthcare systems, are a direct result of a derelict mainstream media that too often bend over backwards to support corporate or bought politicians' wants as opposed to the people's needs for real information to make their lives better. Independent media is the only solution to inform truthfully and factually. Why? Because our loyalties are to you, the ones who fund us with small dollar contributions and subscriptions. Please consider supporting our independent media platforms by subscribing to our Egberto Off the Record newsletter at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. It's an investment that pays incalculable dividends.